you would, turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings chapter 18. So we'll see, here's your quick quiz. 5:12, 5:5:12. Where is 1 Kings in the cha-cha-cha?
Would be in the 12.
5:12, 5:5:12. Like that handwriting? You're used to JB. Where's 1 Kings? History.
Extra point.
There you go. You got it. You're looking for it. First 5 books, law. Then you got history, wisdom, major prophets, and the minor prophets. All right, so it starts off that there is a famine in Samaria. Do we know where Samaria is? Think about the Samaritans. It's over there. Over there somewhere. Samaria.
Didn't you have to go through Samaria to get to Jerusalem?
Yeah, so by Jesus' time, who keeps writing? By Jesus' time, you got, here's the sea. Ooh, the bad sea, remember? And then you got Galilee up here, Samaria in the middle, and then you had Judah down here. So these were kind of here's the sea, a river, and then another sea. So Samaria was the Samaritans. That's bad. This is Jesus' time. But back here, it's just Samaria, okay? And the reason is because remember, Israel had 3 kings, Saul, David, Solomon. Solomon had a son, Rehoboam. He did not listen to the wise guys, the elders. And the kingdom split into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Judah and Benjamin became the southern kingdom. The rest were up in the north, and they were in Samaria. So when it says there's a famine in Samaria, what he's saying is in the northern kingdom, there's a famine. Every king that came was evil. In the south, there were good and bad kings. Assyria came in 722 BC, and they didn't exile them. They took some out and brought other nations in and mixed the blood. So that's why they're the half-bloods when Jesus died. Everyone's like, they're not Jews. They're half Jews and half Gentiles. They're gross. I mean, I didn't say that. Because that frightened me. But, I don't know, Harry Potter, what's that? Blood?
Blood.
Yeah, they're the bloods. Okay, so Assyria came in and did all that. Judah kept going until 605, and that's when Babylon came. So Babylon has now, 100 years later, taken over who the world empire is. So Assyria's gone, now Babylon's the big dog, now they've come in 605, then you had like 3 more deportations, and that's where Jeremiah was at during this time. So we're going to go back in time, before all this, and the year's going to be like 874 to 853-ish. This is the time frame that we're in now. And we're in the north, in Samaria, in the northern kingdom, and there's a big famine. And we read that there's a guy named Obadiah, and he hid 100 prophets and 50. So there's 2 groups hidden in caves from Jezebel. Jezebel, if you don't know her, she's a witch, okay? Probably literally a witch. And she was the wife of the king of the north named Ahab. Ahab was not a good dude, but really Jezebel ran the show. And she was evil. She was all into Baal worship. And it says in verse 4 that he kept them alive, the prophets, with bread and water. Why is that interesting?
Yeah, they want bread and water.
Stop it, they're prophets. They know. What's weird about that? Like, it's just, somebody should just, wait a minute.
Jesus is the bread of life.
Guys, I don't need Sunday school answers. Observation.
Then what's the question?
Famine. There's no bread in a famine. There's no water to make crops to make bread in a famine. A point for you on your quiz. Don't let me forget. So that's odd, right? That there's 100 prophets and they're being kept alive by this one dude with bread. And I think that goes to show that God is providing, right? God is the one in the famine who's providing. we think in verse 17, if you go back, and JB mentioned this in Luke, when you go back, Elijah was sent to this Canaanite woman who was, because of the famine, she is like getting the last of what she can get, and she's going to make enough for her and her son to eat so they can die, because they're done. And God sends them to her, and you remember what JB said, and how he's like, well, why don't you make it for me? And then they do, and then they never run out of stuff. So God again provides for the Gentile, and here he's providing for his remnant, these prophets who are hiding from Jezebel. So, let's see, let's go to verse, verse 20, I guess. And here, Elijah's like, I'm going to end this. There's been this whole conflict in Israel, Northern Kingdom. Who's the better God, Baal or Yahweh? And Elijah says, I'm just going to put an end to this, all right? So Elijah's going to end the competition between the Lord and Baal. It says, so Elijah calls all Israel, probably not all Israel, but probably it means the leaders, the big people in Israel. He calls them all together, and he calls together also 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. Do you know who Asherah is? It's Baal's girlfriend. Alex, if you want to know what that means, ask me when it's not recorded. Yeah, it's a messed up religion. Anyway, he says, how long we hesitate between two opinions, that God or Baal. The Hebrew idiom is, how long are you going to be limping around on two crutches? And the idea is it points to Israel's lack of loyalty to God. So Baal, in this dash here, he's the god of thunder, thunderstorms, or rain. That is who Baal is. And we talked, remember, going back to the creation. So in their creation myth, Baal defeated the sea, Yom. And so Baal's, in their mythology, has proven to be the supreme god. He defeated Yom. He defeated the sea. So, but he's the god of thunderstorms, thunder, and rain, rainstorms, all that stuff. He's depicted holding a lightning bolt, kind of like Zeus. Thunder in Hebrew, I put it there, but if you don't even know that, next to it just write Kol, K-O-L. That is the word in Hebrew for thunder. But as you see, I put it there, like all words, it has a range of meaning. It can be sound, it can be voice, it can be loud, it can be pretty much any of those things. So when we look at verse 26, so he's brought all these people together. Let's see, I'll just start at verse 25. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one ox for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many. And so he's like, you guys do, you do be quicker, I'll do my thing because I'm just one guy. And he says, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. So build this altar, but don't set fire to it, and call on your God. Then they took the ox which was given to them, and they prepared it, and they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. And they said, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. So in Hebrew, it says, O Baal, answer us. And here's Baal, the god of thunder. It says, and there was no thunder. We translate it as voice, but it probably has a double meaning here. There is no thunder. The god of thunder is quiet. And no one answered. And they leaped about the altar which they had made. So they were trying to get him to wake up, I guess. And it came about at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, call out with a loud thunder, loud voice, for he is a god. Either he is occupied or gone aside, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awakened. So he's making fun of their god, obviously. And then verse 28, so they cried out with a loud thunder. So these are probably word plays. It probably means voice, but it's the author's like, yeah, thunder. Let's not forget thunder, right? Because Baal was supposed to thunder and he was quiet. And then we get to verse 29, and it could kind of act like a bookends or an envelope. It says, and the prophets of Baal, they raved until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, but there was no thunder, no coal. You can put, I put my notes K-O-L in all these blanks. There's no coal. There's no voice for thunder. So the trench that he dug around it is like, it says 2 seahs. And this is a dry measurement, probably somewhere between 7 and 11 quarts. So the trench would have been large enough to hold like 14 to 22 quarts, or up to 6 gallons of water, maybe a little more. So he's got this huge thing, and he fills it up with water, and most likely the water came from the sea. There's a brook that's down there on Mount Carmel that it could have come from. I don't know. But when I was there, like, you're on Mount Carmel and you can see everything. I mean, Israel's small. I think it's like the size of New Jersey. So you're on a mountain and you can see down onto the east, and you can see the Yezreel Valley or the Megiddo, and then you can turn around and like, oh, there's the sea. And so, like, you can see a lot for a long. You can see the Mount Hermon up in the corner. You can see Syria. I mean, you see a lot. And so it's all real compact. So if he was preparing, there's nothing for him to have had helpers to bring water, knowing what he was going to do. And so the Lord answers the people, right? So what happens is God brings fire down, consumes everything, it licks up all the water, right? And Israel chants, the Lord is God, demonstrating their faith in Yahweh. They kill the prophets. Like, so all Israel's there, they turn around and be like, well, our God's pretty good. Go Yahweh, let's kill these idiots. So they do. And Elijah's name actually means the Lord is God. And they're all chanting, the Lord is God. Then Elijah tells Ahab to quit his fasting to Baal because he hears the coal of a heavy storm. So he hears the thunder of a heavy storm coming. So he's saying, you don't need to fast anymore for Baal to bring rain. The rain's coming, and it's not Baal bringing it, it's Yahweh. And he says you need to go on because what's going to happen is the rain's going to come, and he won't be able to get off the mountain in his chariot. So he says you better go so you don't get bogged down. So at this point, Elijah has to believe revival has finally come to Israel. Baalism, here's the blank, is utterly humiliated and is proven powerless. I mean, if I saw fire coming out of the sky, I'd be like, these guys are legit. Like, I'm going with these prophets of Yahweh. And essentially, he's hearing everybody chant his name, like, Elijah, the Lord is God. Like Rudy, you know? So it just adds to, like, we did it. Like, we turned this whole thing around. And Elijah tells the king that it's the Lord who brings the thunder, not Baal. The God of thunder can't bring the thunder, but Yahweh can bring the thunder. And then you see in the story Ahab's response, and it's to obey Elijah. Everyone in the story obeys Elijah if you look at it. Even the evil king obeys Elijah, which goes to point out or acknowledge his authority as God's prophet. And then Jezebel hears what happened, and these are her prophets that just got killed, and she puts a curse on Elijah. And she does this thing where she says, I'm going to be cursed too. If I don't kill Elijah by tomorrow, then I'm going to die. That's how serious she is, because nobody wants to die. So she means business. I'm going to kill Elijah, or I'm going to die. And so what happens is, Elijah freaks out. He suffers intense fear. It says in chapter 19 now, verse 3. Yeah, I just turned the wrong page. He runs for his life. I've been scared, but I've never been scared to where I have ran for my life. That is probably next level fear that I haven't experienced. Like, I'm going to die if I stay here. So to actually be motivated enough to move, to run, is terrifying. Elijah suffers despair. He says, take my life. And then Elijah suffers failure. He says, I am not better than my fathers. And so there's a major swing here. He's probably cloud nine, super pumped, like, we did it, yeah! Like, we just burned up all this stuff. God brought it. And then he brings the rain. Like, there can be no doubt. Everyone has to admit Yahweh is superior to Baal. We won. We're back, baby. No. Now he's like, I'm about to be killed. And so there's this huge emotional swing now. And I think it's as high as you go is as far as you will drop. At least in my experience emotionally. And just being silly, like we probably all like watched a sporting event and it was just kind of back and forth and you're just like, we got this. And if you're a Cowboy fan, you're like, we just lost this. You know, you're like, how did we do that? It's like, oh my gosh. That and those experiences are fun, but they're exhausting, right? It's just kind of like, I need to just sit down. So how much more when it's your life? When you thought I just, with God as his prophet, brought Israel back. And now it's like, now I'm actually running for my life. And it says that I say this, despair is the loss of hope. We talked about hope last time. I think what he's feeling here is despair. He's lost hope. If this doesn't work, what will? I mean, like I said, if we saw God bring fire down, we'd be like, told y'all. You know, and then for them to be like, no, we still don't believe, we're going to kill you. But I don't know what else to say or do. If God bringing fire out of the clouds doesn't persuade you, nothing will. So he's despairing. He thinks he's a failure. And it says he goes into the wilderness, and there an angel comes and feeds him what? Bread. So again, you see God is the one providing for his people. And then he goes back to sleep, and then angel feeds them bread, and says you got to get your energy. And then it says he goes into the desert and it says he goes for 40 days and 40 nights. But that walk from where he was to Mount Horeb is a 14-day walk. So why 40 days and 40 nights?
Isn't 40 significant in the Bible? Like the 40 days and 40 nights that happens a lot.
It does.
I don't know the significance.
You're right on. I'm like, you got it.
Did he fast or something?
No. 40 is usually a number of testing or judgment. So what is the big 40? When we think of 40 years, exile, not exile, but wandering. Who was wandering? Israel. When did they wander? After what? Here's my mountain. Moses went up Mount Horeb, which is also Mount Sinai. And then after that, 40 years. 40 years wandering, and then they do what? They enter the land. So I don't know what I think. So yeah, here we go. The answer to the question is it's a reversal. Elijah's going the wrong way. That's what this means. So Moses at Horeb, I did a little chiasm for you. This is not in the Bible. I just made it so you can see it. Moses at Horeb, or Sinai, gets 10 commandments. We'll talk about it here in a minute. Then 40 years of wandering, probably 39, I don't know. And then he enters the land. So what does Elijah do? Elijah leaves the land. He wanders for 40 days and 40 nights. And where does he end up? Mount Horeb. So there's this reversal of where God's trying to take his people. And what does God ask him when he shows up? Why are you here? Like, I didn't ask you to come here. What are you doing here? Before that says, where did Elijah go at Horeb? It says he went to a cave. So we got kind of that connecting to the other prophets who hid. While they were hiding, Elijah was out confronting. Now what's Elijah doing? Now he's hiding because he's scared. So he's hiding from Jezebel in a cave. And God says, or that's the thing, he hides himself from Jezebel in the cave. And God's question to Elijah, what are you doing here? Along with Elijah's answer forms an inclusio. We've learned what inclusio is, right? What's an inclusio? Bookends or an envelope. You can say any one of those. Just happens at the beginning and the end, and then what's in the middle is important. So he asks, what are you doing here? Let me see, let's verse
9 and 13.
Yeah, and 13. So he came to the cage and lodged there, and he gives his answer in verse 10, I've been zealous. Verse 11, God says, go forth, stand on the mount before the Lord, and behold, the Lord was passing by. It says in the middle of the inclusio, God passes by. So the Lord is passing by. Why is this important? Why do you think? He says, hey, come out onto Mount Sinai, out of this cave, stand on the mountain. And when he does, the Lord is passing by.
He did the same thing with Moses.
Yeah, so the backdrop to all this, I put it there, is Exodus 33. So what's going on in Exodus 33, the backdrop here is, you know the story, he's on Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. He comes down, he's got the 10 Commandments, they're all worshiping the golden calf. He breaks the 10 Commandments, he grinds up the golden calf and makes them drink it like a good dad. It cracks me up that he does it, I don't know. Moses is probably funny. Drink this, you know? Anyway, so he does that. He goes back up on the mountain, and God's like, all right, here's the deal. Y'all are going to go onto the land, but I'm going to stay here because if I go with you, I'm just going to kill you. You guys are obstinate, you're stubborn, I can't handle you. Maybe I'll give you an angel and he'll take you, but I'm not going because I can't. I'm done with you. And so what Moses does is he intercedes on behalf of Israel. So they've been doing what? Idol worship. God's done with them. Moses intercedes. What's Israel doing in the context? They're idol worshiping, and Elijah's done with them. Like, I can't do any more. And so there's this whole backdrop here where Moses intercedes. And then after he does, he says, God's like, okay. And so he gets God's favor. God's like, I'll go with you. And then he says, let me see your glory. And God's like, no, because you will die if you see my glory. So he says, hide yourself right here, and I'm going to pass by you. And when he passes by, he allows Moses to see his back. And then we know like his face started glowing when he came down the mountain. So the significance of that, I think, is the significance here. In doing that for Moses, he assured Moses that he is not failed as a leader. He assures him that the nation will be forgiven and restored, and that he will be with his people and go with them. He's not giving up. So what does he say? He says, I've been loyal. Oh wait, I jumped some stuff, sorry. Okay, back to the story. Lord passed by, it says the Lord was not in the wind. So this great wind happens on the mountain. And then there's this earthquake, and it says that the Lord was not in the earthquake either. And then there's fire, and it says that the Lord was not in the fire. And then after all this stuff happens, it just dies down. And says, after the fire, there was a coal of a gentle glowing. Because remember, coal has a range, so it doesn't just mean thunder, it can mean sound. So there's this gentle coal now, a gentle sound of blowing. And Elijah heard the coal, and he wrapped his face. Why did he wrap his face with the backdrop here of God passing by? He knew that he would die. So he's not like Moses. He's like, can I see your glory? He's like, I know from the story that when you pass by, Moses would have died. So he hears the Lord, and so he immediately wraps his face because he knows he's passing by. Because he just said, come out here so I can, and he's passing by. So God passing by Elijah, like I said, it confirms to Elijah his success as a leader in Israel, because he thinks he's a failure. It confirms to Elijah God's goodness. You could even say faithfulness, I'll take that he's not going to abandon his people. And it confirms to Elijah that Israel will find forgiveness from idol worship. And then it says, and behold, a coal came to him and said, what are you doing here? He didn't thunder this time. It was a gentle, loving voice. What are you doing? And Elijah's response is the same. I've been loyal. I'm alone. And I'm going to die. God's gentle coal/voice tells him, go anoint Hazael over Aram, anoint Jehu over Israel, and anoint Elijah, the prophet, is in his place, like he said, in your place. And the meaning of this verse, in verse 17, is God is not finished. He thinks, what else can we do? They're hopeless. This is it. Fire doesn't come down, nothing will convince them. And God's saying, I'm not done. He says, Elijah didn't fail. That's the next blank. God is not finished eradicating Baalism. And Elijah's not alone. He says there's 7,000 faithful in Israel. So there's still a remnant. There's always a remnant. That's for another lesson on stuff. So how was the mission of God advanced through Elijah? Idolatry took a big hit. A lot of Israel turned back to God, actually. So it did get things moving in the right direction. And as a result of his suffering, God showed that his mission was still moving forward, even with the next generation, because Elijah is going to take over for him. God's not done. They haven't lost. All is going to be okay. Next time we're going to see John the Baptist. And for exercising, I think it's real beneficial, so I'm going to jump down in the last few minutes. I'll tell you, the blanket says, don't let emotions overtake you. Take yourself back. Talk about that in a minute, how you do that. Practice grounding techniques to calm and take yourself back. Once grounded, lean on God and listen for his gentle voice of comfort. And so I'm going to give you grounding techniques. I gave them right there. I think I did, right? Yeah. Deep breathing. Inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, and exhale 6 seconds. I deal really bad with anxiety, and I'm giving you these tools that, so what, okay. Need more time. Philippians, you know the famous, be anxious for nothing, and prayer and supplication, for thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God, and then what, the peace of God, right? Which surpasses all comprehension regarding your hearts and minds in Christ. Forever I got hung up on the peace of God that surpasses. Like, what does that mean? And I missed the part that says, regard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. If you deal with like bad anxiety, not like, oh man, I hope I don't get a bad grade, but like bad anxiety, what happens is you're split. We talk about heart as emotions and like down here, but really it's all up here, right? Your emotions, all that's up here. Your thinking and your emotions are all in your head. What happens with anxiety is it'll split your head. It'll split you down the middle. So you will feel one thing and think another thing. Just being honest here, years ago, I sat in a chair and I cried because my body felt like something really bad was going to happen. But my mind could not get to calm down. My mind was like, everything's fine, look around. Like my mind, it was like I was two different people and it was freaking me out. My body felt like my child was walking across the road and I saw a car coming, is going to hit my kid and there's nothing I could do but watch. That's how my body felt. It was like you're stuck in that moment of tragedy and there's nothing you can do. But your mind is telling you that's not happening. Everything is good. Your kid's at school. Like you just can't bring it back together. But the peace of God does what? It guards this. It keeps the anxiety from splitting you. And these techniques I have found help in the guarding. And it doesn't take anything away from God. It's actually part of leaning on God. And so there's deep breathing. And so in that, when I do it, I think about my body. How does my body feel? So as you breathe in, I'm thinking it tickles my nose. My lungs aren't big enough. I don't feel like I can go 4 seconds. Like I'm thinking not about anything, but in that moment. And then I hold it and then I start thinking what does it feel like? My chest is tight. Do your best because your mind's gonna want to jump. Do your best to think about what is this doing. Then exhale. For you to do 4 seconds or 6 seconds. Well, it tickles my lips as it goes out, or I can feel it blowing over, or it feels kind of cool. Just be creative and think about the moment. And what happens is two things. It connects your mind back to what's going in the present. Two, it calms your nervous system. And so that's a good technique. Another one is sensory. This one I've probably done more than any. You do 5 things that you can see. So usually, if you can go on a walk, but if you can't and you're just sitting around, 5 things that you see, and just start looking around. What are 5 things I can see? And you just, okay? And then you move to 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. I usually do taste as 1 thing because it's hard to taste multiple things unless you're eating. And you can change the order up any way you want. That's how I typically do it. And again, what that does is it brings your mind into the present where you're thinking about what is going on right now. And so your mind's not getting split from your body. It's bringing you back. And then the last one is textile. I used to do puzzles all the time because what do you do when you do a puzzle? You're touching and you're thinking. And so your body and your mind are going together. Legos are fun if you have kids or if you're just like Legos. Cooking is one. Ladies and gentlemen, folding clothes is a good one. He's like, I don't have anxiety.
Did my wife tell you that one?
So real fast, I'm gonna draw a brain. This is a brain. And they talk about top-down thinking. This is your top of your brain. This is your prefrontal cortex or your frontal lobe. This right here is gonna be your parietal lobe, occipital lobe. But you cut it in half, and what you have is the limbic system. So you got your thalamus. The limbic system is your emotion. So the top part, this is your reasoning. And then the inside of your brain, the down part of your brain, you got your thalamus, you got your amygdala. In the amygdala, this is where anxiety, fear, anger. Anger is very close to anxiety and control. And you got your like hippocampus. I remember hippocampus because it's a campus, and that's your memory. You got to remember when you're on campus. See? There's a thing that comes over here. It's called your olfactory bulb. You remember that in school, the olfactory? Well, this is your smell. Anyway, so there's all this stuff is in your limbic part. This is your emotional, your nervous system. This is why your body feels all this stuff. And your mind up here can be disconnected. So this is like your heart. That's not spell heart. And this is your mind. So you're walking down the trail and you're like, a snake! That's this, fight or flight. But this kicks in and goes, idiot, that's a stick. You're, oh, okay. That's how the brain works. And it's for your good. But what happens with emotions and stuff like that, and especially with trauma and things, what happens is we get split and we lose our top-down thinking. And these techniques are a great way to get this back connected. You guys are like, how do we get it? So, that's what I really wanted to get to, because I feel like that's very practical. I feel like we all deal with anxiety at a certain level, and if it ever gets out of control, and I put a website, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
This is great. Everybody should go here. They've got all kinds of stuff, and if you have kids, there's stuff for kids. Elliot was going through a bad time this last summer, and she had anxiety. She was scared she was going to die, because she remembers the story of a little kid that was a twin that died. And so she thought, well, this twin died in their sleep, so she was scared to go to sleep. And so it was the saddest thing in the world. And then she knew smoking was gonna like bad for you, could kill you. Well, we were at the 4th of July and she smelled the smoke from the firecrackers and she lost it. She thought she was dead. She's like, Dad, I breathed the smoke. I'm like, that's a different type of smoke. It's gonna be okay. But tools like this helped her. Like, she doesn't have anxiety at all anymore. And so it's just, if you're a parent, it's just a great place because there's all kinds of tools that you can help your kids before things get out of control. Or for you all, if you feel like you're having a hard time managing anxiety or fear or anger even, this is a great place to go to. And it'll give you a bajillion more examples or techniques to grounding than I gave you tonight.